Hello everybody, my name is Ann Théato and welcome to the Psychic Matters podcast, episode number 39. Thank you so much for being fantastic listeners. We're getting some great reviews in from listeners all over the world and I just can't thank you enough for those. Please do keep them coming in. It's really wonderful of you to take the time to write an honest review because it does make a big difference to the podcast and the way it moves up the podcast charts. In this week's episode, I am talking to my guest, psychic medium and author Fleur Lessink, about the mechanics of mediumship and the importance of creating space to receive information from the spirit world. Fleur talks to us about why the rational mind can sometimes block our spiritual connections and the importance of getting good training to enhance our skills. This week's episode is incredibly educational. Listen and learn how mediumship works and why it can be so healing to those who are grieving. My guest today has been named one of the best mediums in Los Angeles by CBS and LA Magazine. She has connected thousands upon thousands of families globally to their loved ones in the spirit world. Her work and her incredible accuracy has made her a favorite on many mainstream TV and radio programs, and she has featured in just as many magazines and books. Word has spread about her incredible work, and of course, she is now much sought after in the entertainment industry, doing readings for well-known A-list musicians, actors, and politicians. I am so grateful that she has been able to make time in her busy schedule to join us today and to share some of her knowledge with us. Fleur Lessink, welcome to Psychic Matters.
Thank you so much for having me, Anne. Such a pleasure.
Oh, it's great to have you here, Fleur. And I'm thinking to myself, how does someone who is just born like the rest of us, we're all born just little babies with all this potential, how do you get to be this wonderful psychic medium with all of these talents and skills and get into the position where you're working for A-list actors and you're on TV shows? How does that work? Where do we begin?
Oh gosh, it's a long story. Well, I think as most mediums, I was very mediumistic as a child. I wanted nothing to do with it. I really, really tried very hard to shut that down for years. And it was an interesting experience because as I was growing up, out of every corner, people would come up to my parents, to me, and say, "Oh, your child is a medium, your child's a psychic." And at the time, I would either roll my eyes. I remember telling my little sister at one point they just want everyone to join their cult, and thinking this is what they say to everybody. And I remember one conversation in which she said, "Well, they don't say it to me." So it was kind of this funny thing. It was always around. I wanted very little to do with it. I tried to shut it down. And then when I was 18, 19, I went to college, to university. I wanted to be a doctor. I studied neuroscience. And in that first year, I got really, really ill. Out of nowhere, 18, having to stop my academic career for this 3-month period of time to try to get my health back. At the time, I was such a nerd that, academically focused, that was the worst thing that could happen to me. And I ended up at a point where doctors didn't know what was going on. Nobody knew what was going on. And my very rational engineer dad said, "Listen, you were so odd as a kid. There were all these experiences. Please go see somebody." And he got me a psychic reading in Los Angeles. So I show up to this lady's house and I sit down. And the first thing she says to me is, "You're a psychic medium. You're not living your purpose. And if you don't do this work, your body's going to give up and you're going to die." And I would never say something like that to somebody now as a psychic medium. It's so intense. But as a 18, 19-year-old, when I heard that, I thought, one, so angry. Why do you get to decide what I do? I want to be a doctor. That's good enough. I'm helping people, stop making this about you, universe. And two, well, I don't want to die. I'm 19. Maybe I should just start meditating and figuring it out. So I had been in such conflict and such resistance to it. And in that moment, really out of necessity, sat down, started meditating. In that first year, every time I tried to run away from it, something would happen to put me right back down on the couch. So I spent a year and a half learning as much as I possibly could about it. I was still in university. I finished my studies. But by the time I was about halfway through, I started doing readings for free just to see, is it real? Is it not real? There was still that skepticism. I would kind of run experiments on myself. And after the 4-year period of time in university, doing it on the side under a fake name, all of it, I thought there really is something to this. And I absolutely love it. So it was this interesting moment where my soul, my spirit was like, this is it. And it took a while for my mind to go, yeah, okay, let's do this. So after that, I worked in LA for, 12, 13 years. And the whole celebrity thing, honestly, while it sounds really amazing, and it is really amazing, they were just ordinary people looking for answers that found me, right? So it really was just word of mouth. And I think once you get into any kind of circle of people and people talk about you, it becomes this thing where you're not quite sure how that billionaire heard about you, but here you are in his palace, and so they are just normal people who still need insight, of course. And so the celebrity thing for me, while it's interesting and intriguing, I think at the end of the day, it feels like a normal reading.
Yeah, gosh, that's so interesting, Fleur. Let's go back, if we may. I want to go back to when you said, as a child, your parents kept saying to you, your child, or people kept saying to your parents, your child is a medium, your child is psychic. Why were they saying those things?
It's interesting. My mom was reflecting back about it the other day. She goes, it hasn't happened to me in years, but when I was a child, if we went to the baker down the street, the baker would say to my mother, I don't usually tell people this, but I work as a psychic medium and nobody knows that, but I just want to tell you, your daughter does this too. Or she had a doctor's appointment, same thing happened. And everywhere we went, there would be somebody who would go, I am a psychic medium. I just want to let you know your daughter is going to be doing this. And it was just such a random thing. And once I started doing it, that's never happened to my family anymore. But the first 10 years, constant. I mean, I couldn't, there was a moment I was walking down the beach and there was an interaction where somebody said, you're going to be working in a spiritual context one day. And at the time I was maybe 17. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I hear this all the time. Thank you, but no.
Yeah. But
was it almost like, just insane.
It's strange, isn't it? How it was a repeating thing until you actually took those steps. Was it something you were doing? Were you saying things? Were you predicting things to people, or were you just standing there quietly and they just say it?
They would just say it. I mean, one of them, like the baker, for instance, there was no reason for that. Now, I said plenty of odd things and my parents took note, but I think in those random moments, that wasn't an indication of me doing anything. It was very much not triggered, I guess, because as a family, my family wasn't exactly screaming it off the rooftops either. So I think it was very much in the family, and this is the best thing that my parents could have done. We are happy to talk about it, and it was open, and it was never made to be something that should be hidden. But there was an understanding that externally people aren't going to understand. So maybe we just don't speak about it, because why create that resistance, right? Why create that fight? And I have always really appreciated them allowing an open space in the home. Even when I didn't want anything to do with it, they would remind me that there had been instances. And so while they weren't necessarily searching it out or encouraging it, once it was there, they never discouraged it.
Yeah, that's interesting as well, isn't it? And it's a relief to have a family that will support. What about yourself as a younger child? Did you have psychic experiences and not tell people? Or what kind of things were you seeing as a child or able to know?
Yeah, I think there's plenty. There's so many in the family history, but I myself don't have much memory of them. And I think primarily because most of my childhood, I was strongly trying not to have them. It wasn't that it was discouraged within the family. It was that I was very aware that wasn't quote unquote normal. And because it wasn't normal, I wanted nothing to do with it. We also moved to the United States when I was 7, 8, and I'm originally Dutch. So there was also that sense of trying to fit into a new culture. I didn't initially speak the language. You're already the odd child in a way. So I think myself, I don't have many memories of that time period. I have stories that have been told to me, but I myself don't have much memory of it.
Interesting. You're probably too busy running about with your play doctor's bag ready for your career that you thought you were going to have. So when you were 17, then you said you started giving free readings to try it out. Who did you get to sit for you, and how did that come about?
Yeah, I put myself, looking back, very, very kind of crazy in a way, but I put myself on Yelp, which in the US at the time was a pretty new platform. This is about, oh gosh, it's a long time ago, maybe 14, 15 years ago at this point. So Yelp wasn't very big at the time, but it grew to be quite big. And I didn't have a picture of myself, and I used a fake name, and I charged $15, like nothing, but I had to do something because we created the appointment. And sometimes I would drive 2 hours to somebody's location to do this reading and drive 2 hours back home. So the price of it absolutely made no sense. But I just wanted practice. And initially, I did a lot of those readings over the phone. I just tried to do as many as possible. And it really was word of mouth. So I think very early on, there was maybe a few people who said, okay, fine, $15, here you go. And then very quickly, that person told 4 people, and that person told 4 people. And so it got to be quite a long list that by the time I graduated from college, I had like weeks long waiting list, and thought, well, maybe I do this. But initially it was me putting myself online because I didn't want anybody to know that I was doing this work. I was very, very scared about people finding out. I thought I would still be applying to medical school, and I was very, very aware that medical schools do research you, especially in the US. So I wanted to have no link back to me. And that was how I initially started, but it kind of took off on its own, to be honest.
And those early readings, Fleur, were they psychic readings, or were you connecting to the spirit world at that time?
Well, I've always said I feel myself to be a natural medium, and I've taught myself to be a fairly good psychic, I would say. I'm good in the psychic world, but that was something I created secondary to my mediumship ability. So initially I was much more strong and able and, potentially just comfortable within the mediumistic connection. And I then used those early years to go, oh, I also have this psychic muscle, but the psychic muscle wasn't something I was initially aware of.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then was it very sad for you to give up your expected career in neuroscience? Was that sad to say goodbye to, or did you embrace that?
Yes and no. I embraced it. I think I realized what I loved most about it was learning, and less about it was the practice of actually going into the hospitals. So once I started actually working in hospitals, I thought, not as great as I imagined it to be. And 2, I think the real appeal was the helping people. So looking underneath the surface, psychic medium just had not been an on the table option when I was thinking about careers. That seemed to me something that wasn't going to be valid for me, available for me. And there were all these belief systems I held around that work that turned out not to be true. So I think for myself, the resistance wasn't so much, I want to be a doctor and I'm leaving that. I think it was more of, I want to find a way to help, to heal, to be in that interpersonal connection with someone. And I think looking at it, I have that opportunity much more as a psychic medium than I would as a doctor. I really get to, as you know yourself, like you get to get in there with somebody and create huge transformation in a way that, unfortunately, oftentimes with how busy doctors are these days, they don't get to do that necessarily. And I think that's what I would have enjoyed the most about that job.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm putting myself on mute and off mute because there's a great big thunderstorm going on outside. So listeners, if you can hear any big crashes, it's the thunder. So a lot of people, psychic mediums, there are people like your good self, Fleur, who are born with this gift. You just bring it with you. I mean, I guess we all bring it with us, but some of us have to work quite hard. We have to go and train at, established institutions and things to bring our gifts out. Can you say a little bit about that, talk around that topic?
Yeah, and I don't want to make it seem like I just woke up one day and was mediumistic. I think initially when I was told at 18, you're a medium, and even when I was a child, I thought, okay, maybe, but it wasn't as if the conversation or the language was right there. And I think when I was 18, 19, and I had that first year and a half where I was really not feeling so well, I kind of lived a monk sort of kind of nun lifestyle where I was in bed by 8 p.m. and I ate like the most clean diet, and I did not do anything that people in their early 20s did. And instead I just meditated, read every psychic book, went to like as many practice things as I could possibly do. And I spent so many hours initially, so many hours. And so I became perhaps a bit obsessive in it, but I just wanted to know it and really dive in. And I think it's a skill set. And so regardless of if you're naturally built for it or not, if you don't put the time in, the skill set isn't going to bring you to the potential of the level that you could get, right? So I think when people are like, oh, it's really hard, I'm having to work on it, I'm like, yes, I know. We all do, right? In
Yes.
that it's a language, and the fluency of the language only gets better the more you speak it.
Yeah, that's true as well. Very much so. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. What about for people who are listening to this podcast who aren't a psychic or a medium? They have other career choices, or are looking after people at home. How, if they wanted to connect with their loved ones in the spirit world, is that possible for those people?
I truly believe that it is. And I know that mediums have very differing opinions about this, but I believe that ultimately, and I feel that ultimately, we are a spirit, a soul, a consciousness, a life force within a physical form. And when we cross, we retain that same spirit life force. Nothing changes, something just drops away. So ultimately, we have the common denominator. We have the part of ourselves that connects to what continues on. And so there is a natural energetic affinity. There's a natural ability to enter the same wavelength, so to speak. And so I think anyone can, when given the right tips, tools, tricks. I also think so many people do it all the time without realizing. And it's very easy to drown out the subtlety of the spiritual connection with the strong rational mind. So when we live in the world that we do, and if you have the jobs, if you don't have the jobs, but it's so easy to get so busy in our rational mind, so busy that you could be having experiences all the time. But if you don't know how to peel it back, or you're not in a position where you've spent some time trying to peel it back, you might never know that this is happening all the time. But I believe that it is for everybody.
Is there a way that you could give us a little exercise that somebody could do?
Yeah. So coming back to my neuroscience background, have been very intrigued by the idea of the mind state that we enter when we connect, whether it's our intuition, psychic ability, mediumship. I think so often with intuition or psychic ability, people think, oh, it just happens, right? We have this random idea and it landed out of nowhere, and like, where did it come from? But in that moment, you were in a receiving state. You entered a spot in which your rational mind took a backseat and the spirit, the soul, was available to the information. And I like to define the psychic and the intuition as the moment your spirit communicates with your rational mind. The spirit always already knew the information. You absorbed it throughout the day, but your rational mind needs to hear it in order for it to help you out. So we need to create some space to receive. We need to create that bridge, allow the information from the spirit to enter the rational mind. And I think that we are oftentimes in moments like that already. So if you could look back at times when you have received random thoughts or random ideas that ended up being precognitive in such a way where it did happen, or things did come to be. If you can kind of look back at your past and say, what was I doing during that time? Was I driving in the car? Was I taking a shower? Was I gardening? Was I folding the laundry? At what point in my life am I most receptive? Because then you can start working it backwards. It's like, what actions trigger that theta, is what it's called, like the theta brainwave. What actions in your life create that space for you to receive that might not be in meditation? Because I think sometimes people initially, they sit in meditation and they're like, this isn't working. I have too many thoughts. I can't enter that state. But we enter it all the time during the day. And so you can work it backwards. You can start looking and going, okay, when I had that random thought, hey, my aunt's going to call me today. Was I doing the dishes? Was I doing something where it was repetitive, where my mind wasn't engaged? What was happening so that I can recreate those moments for myself, or try to find that kind of a mental space on purpose rather than on accident? So I would invite you to take a really close mental check, so to speak, and do a little investigating.
Yeah, that's good. Be receptive and open to receive rather than trying to seek and push for that information to come to you.
Mm-hmm,
yeah,
absolutely. Because we do enter it in moments of our day all the time.
And you are a teacher, of course, so you do teach this to people. So for people who, if people wanted to come and learn from you, Fleur, what have you got going on at the moment?
Oh, yeah, I've got tons of stuff. There's 2 online classes that people can take at any point. So it fits into their schedule whenever they want it, because it's a do-it-yourself course. One is on basic intuition development, and the other one is intuition for the empath. So I found very commonly in my students that they were feeling too much, but none of it was able to boil down into information that was actually helpful. So it's for my oversensitives, my overfeelers, but the ones that can't be intuitive on demand. So intuitive about what they want to be intuitive about. They're just feeling all the other stuff. So those are the 2 online courses. And then I have a mentorship that's coming up June 26th. It's a 6-week course. I work much more one-on-one. We're doing 3 live Zoom calls. You get exercises that are tailored to you. You get meditations. It's a real opportunity for me to meet you where you're at and then help you grow to where you want to be, whether that's in intuition, psychic ability, mediumship, whatever it is. I try to get you from point A to ask you, where is your goal? What is it that you're trying to get to? And then we look at where your point B is and try to get you closer.
Beautiful. So there's some lovely opportunities for people to come and learn directly from you. That's really exciting. I know also, Fleur, that you have a podcast called Moving Beyond, and that you work with a grief counsellor on that podcast. And it's quite a unique and different sort of a podcast compared to things that are out there at the moment. Tell us a little bit about that, because I was listening to one of the episodes and it's so gentle, the way that you approach people's grief. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's one of the projects I'm most proud of. I found surprisingly in the last few years that when I asked people, how did you hear about me? How did you find me? They would answer with, oh, my doctor recommended me. My psychiatrist recommended me. My grief therapist recommended me. And I thought, interesting. It's starting to enter mainstream thought as a possibility for healing in the grief space that hasn't been maybe as accepted in the past. So I thought that was very interesting. And then I thought about how different and complementary the 2 aspects are. And so the podcast looks at a grief therapy session and then followed up by a mediumship session in the way that it usually goes, right? Somebody goes and sees a grief therapist for some time. And in talking to grief therapists, they've told me the issue generally is we hit a point and we can't get past it. There's only so much we can do within the therapy until we hit this snag, and it's a catch-22. And no matter how much talking we do or how much work we do and exercises we do about trying to move past that issue, they're just a little stuck. And she had found that when she then refers them to me, oftentimes that information gets brought up in the reading and we're able to unstick it a little bit and they can go back to the grief therapist and continue their work. So we wanted to show that process and the process that each one of us does individually and how different yet how complementary that they are. And so that is the arc of the podcast. They sit down, people we've never worked with, so it's a little bit different in that it's a first-time grief therapy session. She talks them through the who, what, where, why, and then I sit down with them in a mediumship session, not knowing anything about her grief therapy session. And what's interesting is so often completely different information comes up, yet there is a core theme that we're both tackling, but from completely different angles. So it's been a really exciting journey and really beautiful journey to watch these people transform through this podcast, and also to get to see it for myself, because as a psychic medium, I generally work with someone for an hour and I don't see them again. So getting to see this arc of healing has been really, really beautiful.
That is wonderful. And great thanks as well to the bravery and courage of the guests that you have on, that they're allowing us to listen to their grief, well, so that we can learn from that.
And that has been the most touching feedback, has been people saying, I see myself in this person. I feel like what you said or what Claire said has helped me because I needed to hear it. And so we really tried in the 12 episodes to pick the kinds of grief that we often see, but wanted to make it so that each episode stands alone in its own topic of what somebody is struggling with, the dynamic of the relationship, the way that somebody passed. There's so many themes that we tackle within the grief space. And so we wanted to create that first season as an ability for somebody to go, oh yeah, that's something I struggle with. Let me listen to that episode. And hopefully they would be able to get some of that same help that the person is receiving.
That's beautiful. And so you talked there about the first season. So there's going to be more seasons coming up?
Yes. We will definitely, we're working on it. So we'll get there.
Beautiful. And that's Moving Beyond with Fleur and Claire Bidwell Smith. And that's available on, where will people listen to that? All podcast
everywhere
platforms?
Podcasts exist. Yes. So okay. Spotify, Apple, all of them.
Wonderful. Also, exciting, really, truly exciting news, and huge congratulations to you because you've just brought out a new book. Talk to us about that, Fleur.
Yes, I am so excited about it. It is the same title, Moving Beyond. So it didn't get too creative there. Stuck with something that I liked. But it's called Moving Beyond, Access Your Intuition, Psychic Skills, and Spirit Connection. And it's a book that's very educational, but told through stories. I'm hugely proud of it. It took me 5 years to write, and I just can't wait to share it with the world. I think it's going to really help people to understand the theory, or at least my theory, of how psychic intuition and spirit connection works, how we can enhance it no matter where your level of expertise. You're coming at it from a complete beginner. If you've got a little bit of expertise already or experience already, I think it's really a solid book for anyone wanting to just take their skill set or their ability or their understanding of it a little further.
And you say it took you 5 years to write. That's a long time. I mean, I know writing a book does take some time. Tell us what your process was then.
Yeah, why it took so long.
Yeah, why did it take so long? No, but you have the initial idea, and then, talk us through the writing of it, because it's interesting for people. We all think we've got a book inside of us. So where did yours come from?
Yeah, well, I was quite the opposite. I didn't know if I had a book inside of me. I thought, I don't want to write a book with information that's already out there. That was my big thing. I was like, if I'm going to put a book out, it has to be 90% new information or information from a new vantage point. And that's hard work. Coming up with your own way of teaching, I think, was a real opportunity for me to, in the 5 years, apply these new ideas and these exercises and these ways of seeing the spirit world and testing them out. And I think that was probably what took the longest. I worked through it in such a way where I would go, okay, well, why is this happening, right? And for example, chapter 3 is called Feeling Too Little or Feeling Too Much. And it's a case study of two students in which one comes to me as a professor of philosophy, and he goes, I'm interested in this, and you did a reading for me and it blew my mind, but I can't do this. But I'm here and I want to see if I can. So it's a case study of how do you take somebody who feels absolutely nothing? What are the processes of it? Where's the disconnect? If he's got a spirit body, so to speak, and he's got all the same stuff as I do, why is he not feeling anything and I am? So how can we create these experiences for him? And then on the flip side, I often would get people in who go, I can't go to a grocery store. I can't be around a lot of people. I feel everything far too intensely. And then working with them to say, well, how can we make your intuition work for you so it doesn't feel like a curse? So a lot of this book was me thinking and pondering and philosophizing, having the experiences myself, putting them to the test over and over and over again, rewriting it. And I think that is why it took 5 years.
Yeah, but it's good to take your time and really write what you really mean to write. And I have to say that you've got a beautiful accolade on the front from Tony Stockwell, medium and TV personality, who says, Fleur is one of the best mediums in the world, accurate by sheer work and endeavor. I just want to say congratulations. That's beautiful words. And I know Lana Del Rey has written, there are a handful of truly gifted mediums in the world, and Fleur is one of them.
Well, it's very kind of them, and it means so much, of course. Just the respect of people you admire is a great feeling. So I'm happy and grateful, and it's so meaningful to have their words on this book.
Yeah, it is. It's beautiful. And that's fantastic for all of us, of course, because we all want to go out and buy it now. So where can we go and find that?
Yes, so it's available on Amazon in the UK at the moment. So Moving Beyond, you can pre-order. It will come out July 8th. And then it will also be available everywhere, really, July 8th. But you can only buy it the UK on Amazon at the moment. It will be in the US later on. But you can find it on other book retailers in the moment, like in the meantime.
Perfect. Tell us, Fleur, have you got an example of a really good communication from the spirit world that brought the most amazing evidence? I know, of course, all your readings are confidential, not naming names or anything, but I wonder if you could give us an example of.
Yeah, it's actually one that I write about in the book because it blew my mind. It's a bit mediumship and it's a bit psychic, the mediumship being the spirit connection and the psychic being the psychic endeavors. It was a woman who came in and she, as normal, sits down. We bring in her father who had adopted her son-in-law. It was all a lovely reading. Lovely. She got so much out of it. And at the end, she goes, well, I'd really like to connect to my biological father. And I say, all right, sure, let's give it a go. So apparently, I don't quite remember this, but from her words, I said, well, I don't think he's actually in spirit. And she goes, well, that's odd because I've been searching for him for 40, 50 years. Private detectives and everything. She's like, I've never found him. I really believe him to be passed. And I said, no, I'm fairly confident he's not in spirit. I think he doesn't live in the same state as you. I think his name is Robert. And I think you should look again because I know you're going to find him. And those in spirit said, yes, absolutely. So she, first time of having a first name, contacted with all the information she'd had previously. And she said it had been really hard for her to kind of open that box again because she tried so many times. But within 48 hours, they found Robert, who lived in the state I said he lived. And it was just such a crazy moment where I thought, man, that is some good evidence of the spirit world and her. And I think she was probably ready to hear it, or all the elements came together to create this beautiful communication. And I think what's most amazing about it is he didn't know she existed. They speak daily. He now has a family. They visit him all the time. She, through me, was then able to connect him to family members that he'd lost. And it's been this transformational relationship for this family that was so broken before. So that has been one of those stories where I look back and I think, incredible evidence from the spirit world. So moving to be a part of that orchestration. And all in all, just one of those stories I look back at and go, this is so cool.
It is cool. 48 hours later. That's amazing. Yeah. Brilliant story.
Because there was just some missing bits of information that they didn't have before that created too wide of a net. And to be able to narrow it down just was like, oh, now we got him.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So before you go, talk to us a little bit, because people listening may not know how the process works. So if somebody comes to you, well, people obviously coming to you all the time, really grief-stricken and wanting to connect with their loved ones in the spirit world, how do you personally work? So you sit with your client, and what do you do from there? What can people expect, and what is your process?
Yes. So I personally have people decide whether they want a psychic reading or a spirit connection. And it doesn't mean we wouldn't do a little bit of other things, but I like to know your desired point of focus before we enter so that I can be most open to that space. So that's really all I receive on that client's end. They just tell me where they want to focus, not specific, but psychic or mediumship. And I myself then either open myself up to the spirit side, or I attune myself to my client's spirit, their own spirit, and we take it from there. So for my readings, they're about 50 minutes. I talk for about 35 minutes of those, and then the last 15 they get to ask questions. I like to work in an evidential way, so they just give me a yes or a no. And from my own mediumistic side, as I've grown and explored the different ways I want to work and how I want to bring the information, I'm really, it's important for me to get the evidence, because I, of course, want us to know that these are the people that we've got. But I'm also really attuned to the need, and to say, okay, there's a bigger reason aside from me just pointing out crazy evidential facts that we're here, right? We have to take it up a level. I really want to actually feel transformation in my client while I'm sitting there, whether it's psychic or whether it's mediumistic. And I think when I teach my advanced students, I think that's such an interesting thing to talk about, that in a psychic reading, for example, things are changing as you're saying them. You can feel your client's energy shift and old patterns break, and them renegotiate what they want out of life and how they're creating it, just by you speaking and hitting these chords. And I feel the same with those in the spirit world. You can feel stuff unlock as you go along. And so I feel that that's underneath all the stuff of the evidence and how I work and all of it. My core result and the core desire is the sense of, how do we bring peace? How do we get you realigned to this knowing that there's something else? What is the need? What do you need to hear from someone else, as a third party that knows nothing about you, that can transform your life for you to be living the fullest version of it, and no longer stuck or hooked in to some of these things that are causing such deep grief?
Yeah, that's lovely to know that you can have that transformational change once you've been to see you and you've had that experience. But you said at the beginning, Fleur, I opened myself up to the spirit world. For those who don't know, how do they communicate with you?
Yeah. So I like to think of it as my own spirit soul becoming a little larger than my physical self. And so I create a space around me that then is a receiving space. And those in spirit, I always start in a mediumistic sense, from a blending space. And in mediumship, when we talk about blending, we talk about the feeling of my spirit coming into contact with a spirit person on the other side. That moment where my soul, if you want to call it that, my spirit body gets in contact with their spirit body, and we form a slightly closer connection to allow them in and to say what they want to say. I prefer to work one at a time. So one spirit person comes in, they exit. Another spirit person comes in, they exit. And I then like to create a space in which I have equal amount of receiving in a surrendered space. So like what just naturally shows up, and also an equal amount of asking questions. So I do really believe I can hold a communication with those in spirit in the same way that I would hold a communication here with you. And I can ask, give me more clarity, give me some more information. And one of the ways that I like to really unravel the evidential work is to know that every bit of information that I receive has more information in it. So to hold on to those bits of pieces and see where the need is, and all of it becomes this orchestration of who are you, right? And what are you trying to say? And what's the message? And that has always continued even in these years of working as such an exciting experience to get to really meet somebody on the other side and bring them through in that way. But for me, a lot of it happens clairsentiently initially, through blending, through feeling, through opening myself up in that way. And then initially just allowing kind of the stuff that shows up to show up, and then continuing in that question and answer form.
So using your clairsentience and using the feeling, is it because people are also, you can see them in your mind's eye? Are they speaking to you? How do you visualize them? How do they come close?
Yes. So for me, it's a blend. I always start clairsentiently. I feel them come in. I generally will feel multiple people initially, and then as I turn my attention to one or the other, one will show up. It then becomes a combination of feeling, seeing, tasting, hearing, anything. In that every bit of information I receive, whether it's an image, will be backed up by clairsentient feeling, and then also by perhaps clairaudient thought. So for example, if somebody comes in and it feels like a father, my initial feeling might be of a man. My feeling might then be, oh, I'm big and bulky. I might hear father. I might then see a father with a daughter. I might see a visual image of him of having a mustache at the same time that I feel a mustache on me. So for me, the clairs at this point in my work really blend into each other, whereas before and initially it would generally be just one. So I think for beginners, often that is the case, right? You just start clairvoyantly, or you just start clairsentiently. But in time, I think all the sensations blend together to create the storyline, and there's always more information, but the other information might be in a way that isn't most easily presented to you in just one of the senses, so it has to use other senses. I strongly believe that the way that we perceive information is that we come into contact with energetic vibration, because that's all they've got to work with, right? None of us are working with anything tangible because it's all energetic. And so it's our spirit body then that comes into contact with the energy, and we translate. So I don't believe that the spirit person is choosing to give me a clairvoyant image or a clairsentient feeling or a clairaudient message. I think it's my spirit body's way to say, this is the best way we know how to translate that energetic chord. And you can think about it as music. When you hear a sound, if you are a musician, you might go, oh, that's A. But that's not really A. That's just energetic music vibration that's creating a sound through your eardrum that you are then interpreting as A. And if you're not a musician, somebody could go down the list or the notes and go A, B, C, D, and you'd be like, yeah, A, okay, that matches. We found a match. And I think that's what our energy body is doing with energetic information that's entering, is we're just trying to find that match. And sometimes that match is a clairvoyant image. Sometimes that match is a clairsentient. Sometimes it's verbal. And I think the matches and how you match is dependent on your own life experience, what your dictionary is, how your energy responds. And then it happens so quickly that we think we're being sent an image. We think we're being sent a smell, but it's just our translation of that energy.
That's so interesting. I'm so glad that you gave that explanation, because those who are psychics and mediums will find that really interesting. And those who don't know and don't use their psychic faculties or mediumistic things, they will find that really interesting as to the process of it. So thank you, Fleur, for sharing that with us. So what's next for you going forward? Where are you based in the world? Not that it matters now, we're all on Zoom at the moment. Sure. And what are you hoping to do next? What's the next 12 to 18 months hold for you?
Oh, big questions, Anne. Well, I'm currently in Lisbon. And so Lisbon, Portugal is where I live. I've lived there for the last year. I may go back to Los Angeles afterwards. I'm not quite sure yet. But right now, home is Lisbon. And I'm really excited about this book. That really is my priority over the next year, is getting it out there, talking about it, teaching in correspondence to it. And it will come out in July. So I'm sure my last 4, 5, 6 months of this year will be heavily focused on the book world. But outside of that, I'm thinking of new books, new ideas. I want to definitely keep teaching. I myself have a master's degree that I'm getting in forensic science. And so I'd like to continue that. There's so much, but probably the number one thing is going to be the book.
Fascinating. Forensic science. We'll have to have you back on the podcast. Yeah. You can talk to us all about that at a later date. Fleur, it's been so fabulous talking to you. Thank you so much. I know that people are going to want to look you up. So what is your website? And are you on Instagram? Where can people find you? Facebook? Where are you?
Yes, so it's Medium Fleur, mediumfleur.com. And you can find me with that same Medium Fleur on any of the social media platforms.
Fantastic. And I do transcribe every single word of each podcast episode. And so a complete transcript can be found on my website, plus the resources that you've mentioned and all your links. So if anybody's unsure, they can just go to my website, pick everything up. It will all lead to your door, Fleur.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me out. And this was so fun.
Thank you once again for coming on. I really appreciate your time, and the best of luck with your new book launch.
Thank you.
Well, that was Fleur Lessink explaining the mechanics of mediumship and discussing her new book, Moving Beyond, available worldwide on Amazon. I do urge you all to go out and buy a copy, because it is packed full of information that will be so helpful for your development, no matter what level or stage you feel you are at right now. All the links and resources mentioned in this episode can be found in the show notes, plus a full transcription, and those are over on my website, anntheato.com, ANNTHEATO.com. So head there and you can pick everything up. And do come and join us if you'd like to. We're over on Facebook. We have a group for the Psychic Matters podcast. There's some interesting discussion going on over there about all things paranormal. And I'll be back with you in a couple of weeks' time with another fantastic guest. Have a very successful couple of weeks, everybody. Keep well. And until next time, my name is Ann Théato, and thank you for listening to Psychic Matters.